Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. We've got the Season 4 Reloaded update coming up here pretty soon, and with that, we can anticipate some big weapon changes and a lot of weapon tuning to take place, per usual with any Reloaded or seasonal launch update, right? And the close range meta in particular, especially as of lately, has not been super diverse, so today, I wanted to preview sort of what to expect with the next meta update, specifically for close range, what weapons we are probably going to see nerfed, and what weapons you might want to consider trying to level up now so that they're ready for this next meta patch. So as we go through everything today, if you enjoy the video at any point, let me know by dropping a like on it. And if you're new here or if you have not already subscribed, every day I got you covered with all things going on in COD, so feel free to hit that sub button and turn on those post notifications. So first things first, I do want to break down where certain, SMGs rank right now. Let's be honest, the close range meta is SMG dominant and it's Vanguard SMG dominant, but it's interesting to note like where the certain pick rate is for certain SMGs, because Raven does factor usage a lot when it comes to if a weapon needs to be buffed or nerfed. Now that's kind of why it's surprising that it's taken so long to see changes to the NZ41, which has been the top picked weapon for quite some time. But usually when it comes to a weapon that significantly needs to see some changes, they're looking at, is it being used by the majority of players and is it doing extremely well? So clearly the Marco and the Blixen top choices here. The Marco about double that of the Blixen, but its KD is also significantly lower. A 1.71 KD on the Blixen is kind of absurd. I believe that's the highest KD weapon in the game. It is just behind, just above the NZ. So that's a thing to keep in mind as well, especially because the Blixen is the third most used weapon and players are doing very, very well with it, also winning a ton with it. It has a lot going for it in a way that probably leans towards it getting nerfed. More on that here in just a bit, but obviously those are top picks. I'm surprised the MP40 is up here still, because frankly it just doesn't compete with some of these other meta sub options. It's still good and certainly competitive, but nowhere near top tier. We also have some surprising things like the Mac 10 being up there at a 1.73 pick rate. The MW MP5 is up there despite not being incredible. The Armaguerra, which is better than both of those, lower at a 1.21. We've got the Type 100 a little bit lower there, the Vanguard PPSH. So we've got a decent amount of SMGs spread across things. Owen gun and well gun under a 1, the 0.69 on the well gun. Nice, but we do have an interesting dynamic when it comes to pick rate, and those numbers are important to keep in mind. But if we were to look at the general SMG tier list that we made a few days back, it's pretty well laid out in my opinion in terms of what is the absolute best to use, what's very close in terms of the MP40, the Sten and whatnot, the UGR is even up there, what's really not all that great. And this I think is a good way to view, is this meta open, is this meta diverse? I think just off the fact alone that this is all Vanguard, and then if we were to just rank like the competitive ones, I think this order is relatively close. It's all Vanguard. There's like the Cold War options and the MW options here. The CX9 is pretty solid. You could maybe use that and get away with it, but you're gonna get outgunned by a good player with anything in top meta here. Same deal with either of the MP5s. The Mac 10 for sure up close. The AUG doesn't really have great mobility or good magazine size for the SMG build. So like there are so many drawbacks here that I think a lot of the focus is still gonna be on Vanguard guns. And really, no Cold War or Modern Warfare subs are going to ever end up in top meta again, unless we see major damage or mobility buffs to these guns. Like if they had the mediocre mobility that they have now, but really, really good TTKs, then maybe they could be up top. But that's probably unlikely, I would say. So unless they get major damage or mobility buffs, they're not going up. Or if we see significant mobility and damage nerfs to a lot of these Vanguard guns, nothing is really going to change in terms of the Vanguard dominance, at least in my own opinion. But within this little Vanguard niche that we have, how are we going to see updates? There's a few things that I would expect. As mentioned, the Blixen is probably going to see another nerf of some kind, because it's already undergone several small damage multiplier nerfs, some mobility nerfs here and there, and it's still the best gun in the game. It's still the best sub, I should say, the best close range option in the game. And as we saw, it's insane KD and win percentage, plus having a high pick rate just means that it is being overused and abused. So I fully expect the Blixen to be taken down a little bit. Is that going to drop it into competitive? Who knows, but it's definitely not going to be the best gun after this update, I feel like. The Marco is sort of a toss-up because it is the second most used gun, but it's not as dominant as the Blixen is, because like the top builds don't have insane damage ranges. They drop off pretty early. Its recoil is not the craziest in the world. It's got great mobility, but there are differences between it and the Blixen that make the Blixen so good and the Marco not as good. So that could go either way. The Marco could just be left as is, and if that's the case, it's definitely going to be a top choice, arguably the #1 sub. If it does see some nerfs, then we have a very interesting SMG meta. The Armaguerra is one that I think is a big sleeper weapon. We're going to look at a TTK chart here in just a moment to further this discussion a little bit more, but Armaguerra, pretty solid TTK. It drops off a little bit early, but it's also super easy to use. The recoil is very basic, so even if you're landing more shots with the Armaguerra and less shots with the Blixen, despite having you know, a lower TTK with the Armaguerra, it's probably going to be better in the long run, you know what I'm saying? So that's a sleeper gun for sure, as is the PPSH. The thing is just utterly insane. It's got a great, super competitive TTK, good mobility, great magazine size. The PPSH is slept on, and I think that usage rate is going to increase a lot. Also, I'm bumping the Sten up to top meta because it is another sleeper weapon. We'll look at the graph here again, and obviously we've talked about this recently. The thing fries. Great mobility, great TTK. Recoil is a bit but you can look past that in certain cases. But PPSH and Sten, I feel like, are two weapons that a lot of players are going to increase in usage. A lot more players are going to be putting those on their classes if we see big nerfs to the Blixen, potentially the Marco. Type 100, I'm really curious to see if that sees any changes because it's kind of the new AS Val. It's really, really strong. The TTK is insane, but it's got terrible control and pretty slow mobility for a sub, so it's balanced out in that way. I'm curious to see if they make any changes there. The Owen gun is just sort of that one that we're familiar with now. It has a decent close range TTK, terrible long range TTK, or mid range I should say, to be more accurate, but it's still competitive for what it is. And if we were to go over to True Game Data, as always, shout out to Tony for getting all this information for us. We can look at the Owen gun, Type 100, Vanguard, PPSH, Armaguerra, Marco, Blixen, and Sten, and see how accurate they are to what my assessments were, if they're super competitive and need a buff or need a nerf, you know what I'm saying? So like I mentioned, the Owen gun, our orange line here, it is very competitive through the first 18 meters, especially from that 12 to 18 meter range. Its drop-offs though a little bit more in line with something like the Armaguerra or the PPSH, but then after 23 meters basically it's useless. So it is entirely a close range SMG, but it fits in the close range meta. We also have our Type 100 here, our bright pink line, which clearly is the fastest killing sub, but like I said, the recoil is abysmal. Its sprint to fire is not all that great. Its ADS is not all that great. So there are other cons that I think keep it in check. So we'll see if that gets changed. The middle area here though, outside of the Owen gun and the Type 100, if we were to actually go ahead and hide those, things are very competitive. The Marco, great close range TTK, but you guys can see this light blue line, just how quickly it ends up dropping off here. Then over range, yes, it has the best like mid-range TTK from 25 meters and beyond, but its control there is also questionable at that range. But clearly it is a decent choice with this build, with this top TTK build, so it's certainly usable. It could see some nerfs to bring its close range TTK maybe more in line with the Armaguerra and the Blixen. You can see pink line here, Blixen, great range, great damage through the first 21 meters, drops off pretty severely after that, so that is what it is, but the first 21 meters, it's tough to beat. The Armaguerra, like I said, I think it's a sleeper weapon. Yes, it does drop off at 16 meters pretty harshly, but like I said, it's so easy to use that even though the PPSH here slightly better TTK, Marco slightly better TTK, you miss some more shots with those versus the Armaguerra, and suddenly this line, our green line, is lower than this, and you got a better TTK with that. So Armaguerra, definitely one that I think is super competitive, especially through the first close range area. There's 16 meters or so. It fries. Vanguard PPSH, our teal line here, right there with the Sten, which also has a great damage range here, 16 meters before it drops off, and you can see brown line over range. Fantastic. So clearly the Sten is a top choice as well, and that's why I said I think it's going to increase in usage a lot. But PPSH here, very competitive. Negligible difference between this and something like the Marco after its damage drop off. Even the Blixen and the PPSH are not all that far off in close range, and after those damage drop offs, they're very similar. And the PPSH has so many other upsides with its hip fire accuracy and that hip fire build you can create with its huge damage per mag because of the 71 round drums. It's really good control and mobility. It has a lot going for it. So if I were to choose two absolute sleeper weapons, it'd probably be the Sten and the PPSH, with the Armaguerra shortly behind in terms of what's going to see a big increase in usage with this next meta update, with things like the Blixen and potentially the Type 100 and potentially the Marco maybe dropping off a bit. But that said, that is going to wrap things up for this one. If you're looking for some SMGs to level up to sort of future proof yourself, that's what I would recommend. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video though. If you did, let me know by dropping a like on it. And if you're new here, feel free to hit that sub button and turn on those post notifications. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.